Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Powerless Podcast. In this episode, I talked to Adrian, who is the vocalist of the band Luca out of the Chicago, Illinois area. Luca and I discuss a lot of his start of music, everything in between from what first got him into heavy music and started writing his own, as well as deep diving into Luca's latest EP, The Window Room, that just came out on February 28th. Really heavy, really good 4-track EP. Highly recommend it. We get into all the weeds of the different topics that are covered in it. A lot of lived experience is talked about in this podcast, and we go into a lot of details there to kind of pick Adrian's brain about politics and political views. The song "Burial Rights" that is on this is pretty much a call out against police brutality and systemic violence. So that's where I kind of really kicked off with kind of deep diving into this band when I first heard that song from this latest EP. So we break down that and a lot more in this. I really appreciate that Adrian came on and took some time out of their day to have this conversation with me, and I really hope you enjoy it. Before we get into the episode, make sure to follow Luca on all social media at WeAreLucaIL. So that'd be on Instagram, I think TikTok and Twitter as well. You can follow the podcast on all social media platforms at thepowerlesspod. Email me at thepowerlesspod@gmail.com and get in contact with me if you have criticism about the show or you want to come on, whether you're someone in the vein of like a Luca, where you're in a band, whether you're a vocalist, guitarist, any sort of musician. If you're a producer, I've had on people like Joey Sturgis before. We've had on a lot of political guests, like journalists, political commentators, everyone from Jordan Mule, who's on the Young Turks and does his own show, The Insurgents, to Matt Good Politic guy who does a lot of political commentary, and a lot of different people in that vein as well. So with all that said, make sure if you hear this and you're in a band or you're into politics and activism and all those things, that you contact me if you want to be on the show at those veins. I'd really appreciate it. Again, those will all be below. I'm going to keep this intro nice and short so we can get right into the episode with Adrian. So here it is, breaking down The Window Room and learning a little bit more about the band Luca out of Chicago, Illinois. Thanks so much. I think, and maybe you could clarify this if you've got a connection with this band. I think it was like over a year ago, I talked to a member, I think his name's Anthony Conti of Resistor.
Conti? Yeah. That little fuck?
Yeah. He's who first connected me, like, kind of with finding out about your band, because I told him I was from the Illinois area, Northern Illinois, and he was just like, well, have you heard of this band Luca? And I was like, man, I've kind of been out of the Chicago scene. I live like an hour and a half away now. I haven't been like playing in a band for a couple of years that like would play shows constantly. So I was like, no, I haven't checked this band out. I'll be honest. Usually I sometimes have that I don't know, that instinct to go like, oh yeah, I've heard of them, but I haven't, like that old.
There's like a flyer maybe, or like you always like see like yeah.
And then I instantly checked you guys out right after the recording, because he talked about you guys for a little bit. He's like, no, you should, if you like my band, you should check this band out. And he was not wrong. I was a big fan of everything about the band, the music you had put out. Big fan of like the heaviness and the greatness, and of course some of the politically or socially conscious lyrical content, which is something I like to break down a lot on this podcast. So I was like, oh, this is definitely my beat. Like, I really, really, really dig this. And kind of like getting more into the band, especially like with the latest EP, which we'll get into in just a little bit, that you put out on February 28th, The Window Room. I was like, yeah, this is like so my speed. This is like, I got to get this band on, So happy to have you on. I'm here for the Powerless Podcast for the next episode. I think this is going to be episode 86 with Adrian, who is the vocalist of the band Luca out of Chicago. I know you guys just went on tour, did a bunch of things, but just in general, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm excited for this. So I'll preface it with this. I'm very excited. We all got the plague right when we got home. We all got tour plague. Every single one of us, except for our drummer, maybe, but it might catch up to him. My bassist and I live together, so we've been on the couch just like, but the run was fucking awesome. The run was fucking awesome. The reception was really cool. But yeah, immediately got home, and then like I think like around, he got sick first, and then like around like 10 p.m. I was like, oh, I'm tired, and I'm like a night owl, like we all are kind of. So I'm like,
yeah,
Oh, like that's weird. I'm pretty tired. I must be just tired from tour still. And I woke up at 3 in the morning and was like, ugh, oh no, I've caught it. But I'm kind of we're on the upswing. Ate some Thai curry, got some
Yeah.
Dayquil, and that's so we're fighting back against it. So
Thai curry and Dayquil is the musician remedy to all ailments, right? That comes from touring.
It works. It works. I promise you. Anyone who's listening, like, just get like your favorite Thai curry, take some Dayquil, drink a bunch of water. You're fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's something about like I'm not like a big like I don't like eat Thai curry regularly, but like I'm a big fan of like when I'm sick, I will drink like Dayquil or like do your usual over the counter remedies, and then just drink some like broth that I put way too much spicy shit in it. Like it's something about like
Are you a spicy guy?
that like just like oh yeah, definitely.
You're a spicy guy?
I say that, and then probably people, but I like to put like ghost pepper, hot sauce, and things.
No,
and, like,
we're the same kid. You like spicy, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. You like spicy, but there's a point where it does hurt.
Yes, yeah.
And sometimes I do want that, but not all the time.
Yeah, there's something about I think it's like the little like masochistic part of my brain that like even when it is too hot and I know it's just like destroying my esophagus, like I enjoy it way too much.
Fuck yeah.
But yeah, so again, happy to have you on. I thought what we would do today is kind of break down where you got individually started in music, where kind of heavy music, alternative music became a big formative thing for you when you started like writing your own. Of course, the start of this band Luca, which you guys have put out, several releases, a lot of good songs, especially, obviously this latest EP. And then if we have time, as long as we're not like, as long as I'm not like over rambling like I tend to do, I thought it'd be cool to do a track by track, like at least lyrical, since I'm guessing, as the vocalist, you maybe primarily do the vocals, lyrics, but even if you don't, your thoughts on them, to break down this new EP that I think everybody should definitely check out. So to kick things off here, I guess like to go back as far as you can, tell me when music in general or heavy music became a big part of your life. Was it family members? Was it kids at school? Was it somebody, the kid that wore all black, the first person that like showed you a cool CD, like that kind of deal? Just kind of tell me where this sort of music became a formative force for you.
Sure. So as a young lad, and still now, I really like anime, and I was watching AMVs. And there was like a Naruto one, and it was like Linkin Park, and then it was over. After that, I was like, I grew up in like a first generation Filipino family, so there's not like a lot of that, at least in my family. Like I didn't know what music was really until around like 6th grade, and then like stumbling on like watching this video, like, oh shit, like what is this? And it's like a fucking like I don't know, like Faint or like In the End, you know what I mean?
Yeah. One of those like many like iconic AMVs you would see from Naruto or Dragon Ball Z or whatever the case may be.
Early, and that was kind of my gateway. I did have like because of that, I started to get more into like I don't know, like the like post-hardcore emo-y kind of things, like I don't know, like Silverstein or like like what's it called, Hawthorne Heights. And then I had a friend, 7th grade, shout out Mike, my buddy Mike. He was like, oh, you should check he gave me a Trivium CD for my birthday. He gave me Ascendancy, and then that was kind of like the pipeline. It was like I was already kind of getting into music and the heavier like alternative stuff, and then that was kind of like at the time probably like the heaviest thing that like I had listened to. And it kind of just went from there. Eventually, like I was like playing like in a cover band, playing guitar, which I'm awful at guitar now. But at the time, like I just wanted to like jam with people and like try to find like peers in that realm. My first band, we were like covering like As Blood Runs Black and like Kill Switch and just like fucking around. And then that was kind of like my guest gateway into like local music, I also grew up in like the northwestern suburbs, so there was a bit of a scene in that. Yeah, I don't know. Where do you want me to go from there?
I guess like a couple of things. First, hearing the name as Blood Runs Black as formative, like that like opens up parts of my memories from high school. I just remember like watching those sort of like they did like a playthrough video of like I haven't listened to them a little bit, but like their their like biggest song that was like on MySpace at the time, you know.
Hester Prynne, or like what was it? In Dying Days, like one of those.
It was in
like,
Dying Days. It was definitely in Dying Days. And I just remember watching them and just like being like, what is this? Because it was definitely like I had listened to Kill Switch and As I Lay Dying and several other bands that like kind of had those like big choruses and you know, kind of breakdowns, and but you know, you could transition from hard rock to that. And then you got to As Blood Runs Black and you're like, what is this? This is like,
no, for
so
sure. I was
you know,
was getting into Prada at the time. That was like a big one for me, like younger, and like you just kind of like, I don't know, like I'm sure you get it. Like you start to get a taste of like really like more chaotic music, and like you're kind of like finding like crazier stuff. Not that like love Prada, but I'm not like the craziest thing in the world. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of like you start like learning like the subgenres, and then like that kind of got me into like more of hardcore when I was like playing more shows, and like, you know what I mean? Like it was just kind of like, it's the pipeline.
Yeah, you venture further and further down the hole away from like anything that would be considered like commercial. Not even commercial in like a bad sense, but commercial is in like a somewhat big indie label is trying to push this band with a music video, like Prada or something like that.
No,
or
for sure.
Silverstein's another big one, right? Like all these bands, and then you go further and further down the hole of like heavier or even just weirder or just off kilter things and all that. Like I'm totally with you there. I guess like from that, where's it come to? Because, you know, I think there's a lot of people that, you know, you say you played in cover bands, you know, playing guitar in cover bands and stuff like that. I think a lot of people get really into this kind of music. They don't necessarily start like instantly then, even if you're musically inclined, start like playing it, right? Let alone doing the vocals in like a very heavy band such as yourself. So where did that come in for you? When did you like, it sounds like Luca was probably, fair to say, not the first band you played in. So where did that kind of come from for you? And what was your trajectory into kind of being in like the musician side of the kind of scene of heavy music?
I guess I'll give you the short history. My first real band, I guess, quote unquote real band, I played like keys in, and I was like learning vocals and was like did backup vocals in it. And we were kind of like I don't know, like a Winds of Plague, Make Them Suffer kind of thing. Nice. And that was kind of like when I was like very ingratiated now at this point in the scene. I was probably like 16 or 17. That fizzled out. By the time I was like just out of high school, I had started like another band, and I did vocals for the first time in that band. And that was around when Luca started, and there was a show that we had all played, like I'd say like 2016-ish. And that was kind of when I got to know the guys in Luca, and then, you know, a vocalist left the band, and then I had that project that fizzled out on my end, and I was finishing up college, and then eventually I tried out, and it was kind of like, oh, well, we're already friends with you. Like, can you put in the work? Cool. All right. Sounds good. It kind of just went from there. And I just think I joined the band like late 2018, 2019-ish. Yeah.
So I guess like, because the first song the band has out is Waterloo, that came out in 2018. That's you, right? Or did you? Okay. So yeah, like at least 2018 you're talking here that you've been in this. So I forget how long that's been now. That's what, like 7 years?
Yeah, 7 years.
Yeah,
holy shit.
I tend to think 2018 is still like 2 years ago for some reason.
Right. No, same.
But well, that's really cool. You know, you get in this band. I first have to say your vocals in this band were kind of like what pulled me in. You know, I love your guys' music, and big props to the entire band. I don't like to be that person that's like the vocals are everything, but I think vocals a lot of times for people, if you're putting on something for the first time, especially if you see a clip on social media or whatever else, it's what either pulls you in or has you go to the next thing a lot of times, right? Like, and yours are definitely like, you're very it feels very like, and the band in general does too as well, obviously, like very hardcore influenced, you know, which you kind of alluded to that being a big part of your music trajectory. I guess like when the band got together, what's kind of been if you could speak to it all with like the songwriting process for you guys in general, and then we can get into the CP and your releases and stuff, but what's like kind of the songwriting process been for you guys? What's kind of your take when it comes to making songs, creating songs? I guess like what's the spark for you when you're either writing the lyrics or coming up with the cadences for your vocals and all that kind of stuff? What kind of like is it just kind of cover whatever made? Do you write endless notes app lyrics?
That's part of it.
That's definitely
part of it. Yeah.
Just kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the writing process, I think a lot of it starts with like, yes, I just like kind of write like note stuff whenever I get a spark, if you will, or like whatever, something I want to talk about. I think what I've been saying lately is that like I just like to write about like lived experience,
Yeah.
which I know you mentioned you wanted to talk about kind of like the, like I guess the political lefty leaning stuff. And
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
that is part of it, but mostly it's just us trying to be honest about
yeah.
like things we've been through, things we've experienced. I didn't have like exactly the greatest childhood, regardless of any like privilege or whatever or not. I just kind of try to speak on those kind of things in my own like lived experience. Yeah, that's about the most I can like really clarify on it, I guess. But then like our guitarist Nick and Flip they'll kind of write like a excuse me, they'll kind of write like a bass line, like a skeleton of a song, and then like we're like, all right, we take it, everyone kind of puts their spin on it. We're a big guitar pro band, so it's a lot of like edit the tabs, let's all meet up, let's jam it, let's rinse and repeat. Our bassist Connor, he works as an audio engineer, so we have the
Oh, nice.
we have like a studio that we can like go to and like do pre-production. So that's kind of like the step 3 out of 4 of that is like we end up doing pre-production. Then we have a friend that we named Jeff, and he's kind of like our outside ear. He kind of like gives us like a litmus test and like what should we change, what should not, an opinion, we'll take it or leave it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we just kind of do that, rinse and repeat until it's like we feel that it's ready to take to the studio.
That makes a lot of sense. And like, to go back lyrically, like to clarify, that's actually what I like to get into in general. I've talked to plenty of bands that don't have like a political bone in their body when they talk about lyrics. But like, what's interesting is when people do real like lived experience type stuff. Because I'm sure like, there are like legendary, bands that have very politically conscious lyrics and all that kind of stuff. Those people do great. But I think there's something to, regardless of whatever ideology or whatever, of just like being raw and real and honest with your perspective of the world, right? And like I think for a lot of people,
that's literally it. Yep.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people that are sort of in like alternative or heavy music spaces, that tends to go to like quote unquote like left leaning or whatever the case may be stuff, just because like I don't know, like you're experiencing, not to get all into it a little bit, but like you might like be experiencing things that like the systems are not catered to your well-being, right? Like so that's where like a lot of that stuff can kind of come from. And I think that's like and honestly, even from like a political perspective, that's honestly like more connection fulfilling than somebody preaching at you about some, because they know more than you about political ideology or political theory or something like that. Like I don't really think that's Go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. No, I guess I'm just like agreeing with you. Like, I mean, like it's kind of like this thing that we talk about, that there's a lot of like, social media, political discourse, and some of that is great. I think that there is like a space for it to like kind of like urge people to take action and for people to like be aware of certain things, whether it's like the oppression of people or like the way that like, I don't know, like this aspect of capitalism that's part of your life is like fucking these things up, and this is why these things are a problem, or yada yada yada. But there is also an aspect of it that's just like it's a fucking Instagram story, and like you're not going to do anything about it besides like post the Instagram story. And I think in the I guess the like what we try to do, and like we've only started to dip our toes in this, is that like I think that like making art is praxis. I think that's like very that like creating art and then like putting it into your community and like bringing awareness, and that I think there's there's definitely a place for that, you know what I mean? So I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I've probably said this on this podcast too many times, but like for somebody like me that grew up in like a conservative rural farm area, right? Like if I hadn't heard Rage Against the Machine or Rise Against or something like that, I probably wouldn't have developed any of the things that I believe in, right?
That shit radicalizes people.
Yeah.
You hear a fucking sick riff and you're like, you dig into the lyrics and you're like, oh, okay, like this is like a thing. This is a thing that maybe I should look into this more,
Yeah, it definitely can pull you out of the mold of like, I think now a lot of people kind of get some of that stuff from social media, which can be problematic for a lot of things. You just alluded to it. I always kind of refer to it, and maybe this is a little crass at this point, but like I refer to it as like the black square mentality, where like there was this huge there's the huge protests and uprisings over George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, which were all very, very, very real and very warranted and awesome, and like something that I was inspired by. And then a lot of people tried to kind of devolve it down to who shared a black square and who hasn't on their social media. And it's like,
if we're getting the sauce, it's like the neoliberalism thing. It's just like
you're speaking my language. Yeah,
it's like one of those, and I try not to be too condescending about that.
Right.
Because I was there when I was at some point in my life. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, all right, your heart's in the right place, but is it performative possibly? Sure. Could this help people maybe radicalize further? Maybe. But for sure, it's coming off as a little bit of like a, I don't want to say it's ignorant, but it's kind of ignorant. You know what I mean? Like, it's,
yeah. It's I forget, there's somebody I had on this show. It must have been a year ago now, God, but it was like every day we're killing our inner liberal is kind of what they put it as. In the sense of like not doing that to become like right wing or something, but doing that to be more grounded in how you approach things, more tangible in how you assess things, and more realistic and more like in the weeds of what you can actually do and what impact looks like and all those different things, right?
I'm big on like we should like do more mutual aid in hardcore. We should feed people. We should like, I don't know, give out a few fucking books. You know what I mean? Like I think you can probably agree with this, that like when you start looking at like the whole giant big picture, it'll just make you fucking go crazy. And maybe some people are better at that. Like I'm sure there's a lot of like, like political commentators or like people that can like look at the big picture and like, make it digestible for people, or like they can handle it. For me, it just makes me fucking freak the fuck out. So I think of it as more of like, what can you do to people that you can immediately speak to in your life? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the way to go, and that's the way to do it to where it isn't condescending, right? Like, because there's people you can speak to that like, you can find pretty quickly in the United States, no matter where you're at, whether you're in Chicago or a rural area like myself, or South in the West, whatever. People that have like sort of incoherent politics or like stuff that's all over the place. If you're like, yeah, but here's a way you can help your community, or here's a way that like you can better, here's a way that you can better the school in your area, here's a way that you can do this, or whatever else, like mutual aid, like you said,
because then like some people will hear this, like even our conversation right now, and they'll be like, oh my god, these fucking leftists fucking asshole, they're fucking, they're like, they're all talking about Marx, and they're looking at fucking Mao and blah 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 blah. And it's like, I'm with that because I find it interesting and I want to know more about that and whatever. But the reality is not everyone like finds like a, like, for lack of a better term, like an autism interest in it like I do. You know what I mean? Like there's like,
yes, yeah,
there's a part of it that's just, it just makes my brain tickle and I want to know more about it. But not everyone sees it like that. And I think that we should acknowledge that, because I think if we do that, then the more people who are like the rad lib fucking whatever buzzword, like, they'll do something. It'll still do something for people, because at the end of the day, that's all that fucking matters in my book, is that you're helping someone.
Right. If you're going online on Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever the fuck thing people are using nowadays, and just like yelling at people about how their beliefs are wrong, it's like I have friends that sort of do that, but also do a lot of really good work, so it's fine. Like it's like what, you're just giving yourself a headache, man. Just like
discourse will always exist, and it will exist in these communities, and there is a place for it. It's just like, personally for me, like a conversation with like one person like you is great. Trying to do it into like the fucking big internet like subconscious or a collective unconsciousness, it's just too much for me personally.
Yeah.
Talking to someone
more and more,
like a person,
yeah,
is cool. But yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Unfortunately for a lot of people, the revolution is not only not going to be televised, it's definitely not going to happen on Twitter. But yeah,
Dude, if it happens on
like,
Twitter, then we're fucked. We're fucked. We're so
yeah,
fucked. We're so
yeah,
fucked.
we got a lot of other problems going on. But yeah, no, again, that kind of leads into what I was talking about earlier of breaking down. What I thought we would do is obviously break down your newest EP, The
Okay. Yeah.
Window Room, 4 songs on it. And if there's and what I'll say here is we'll go through this, and then if we have time, if there's like another song from your it doesn't have to be political, but if there's another song or two from your other releases that you're really proud of or that you have a lot to say about, we can also dive into that as well. But starting off with this EP, again, each one of these songs, your first 2 songs on this do not cross the 2-minute marker, right? Which is a very hardcore of you.
Mm.
And then the last 2 are more convenient lengths. The one that really caught me, which I'm sure is not a surprise to you, is Burial Rights.
Yep. Yeah.
But go ahead and speak to this EP first and foremost. Like, I guess you kind of broke down the songwriting in general, but like, was there a different approach for this one from the other ones? Did this feel like just like a natural progression as far as like the band and the songwriting goes? And just kind of speak to it in general, and then we can break them down track by track.
Sure. This is definitely a pandemic EP. So I'll say that first. We started writing this, like the first bits of this were like early 2020, like late 2019, and then obviously the pandemic happened. We already had some singles in the what's it called? We had some singles in the oven that we had recorded, and then the pandemic like happened, and then like it was kind of like, well, we need to like finish these songs, and they kind of like started to grow from there over like the whole fucking time, as well as some stuff that's coming up. Big things coming,
Big things coming. Yeah.
Big things coming. But no, yeah. So I like to say, in a way, it is a natural progression, but it's also kind of a reintroduction, I'd say. We kind of came to a point where we're like, our last EP, Sink or Swim, we're proud of it, we love it, but we didn't necessarily feel like it like represented us as people or the sound that we wanted or like just us as a band. And so we made a very like big effort to refine our writing process that we talked about earlier, to write stuff that, like, for lack of a better term, like is darker, I think, just because like, and just doing stuff that's like a little more like I said, lived experience kind of stuff versus like kind of like what I think is like the last EP felt like a lot of like kind of statements, but like they felt not as like honest, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, it kind of it went down that route. We had like a 3 single EP beforehand, so that was kind of our first litmus test of like, do we want to do the sound, do we want to like kind of go this route? And the answer was like, yes, this is what we want to do. We want to be this kind of band. So we ended up, I don't know, ended up doing the thing. This was the EP that I think like really like we really figured out like where we wanted to be as a band, where to like go from like kind of like seeking a sound to like it like, I think we know like what our sound is more now, and we want to take it and go from there.
Yeah, to speak to that a little bit, because obviously I've gotten your background a little bit in music, but like in general with this band and with your bandmates, and you could speak specifically to this EP, I guess, like since you're saying it's kind of like a, I already neglected the word you specifically said, but kind of like a a restart in some ways in what you're trying to accomplish musically. Are there big influences you all have collectively that you put into these projects? Is it kind of like an amalgamation that you all listen to and pull from different things? Like, what's kind of the consensus there with what really influences Luca's music, specifically with The Window Room?
Yeah, I think like a lot of early 2000s metalcore. I think like
I hear that a lot. Yeah.
Our influences are definitely kind of all over the place, but we're pretty like ubiquitous on like, like the heavier ends of Under Oath and Norma Jean. We get Eated a lot, and like that's one of those like, yeah, I see it for sure. Yeah, we definitely pull from that. One that we actually did on our release run is that we were covering The Bled, the song Who's Seatbelt, and we kind of realized that there's so much DNA of that band like in ours, whether it was coincidence or not. Like, the stuff that was like very much like early 2000s metalcore. I like to speak on like we're all into like nerdy stuff. Like a big influence on the band is Neon Genesis Evangelion and like Serial Experiments Lane. I don't know if you're familiar with either of those animes.
No, but I'll check them out right after this.
They're two like they're like damn near like schizophrenic, like very self-indulgent, introspective shows that we took a lot of like not only like from a visual standpoint, but just from like the ethos of both those things. Both shows, especially Evangelion, it was like this, like it's a little incomprehensible at times, but the big thing is that this guy was like pouring his heart into like making the show and like airing out traumas and airing out like his bullshit. And I think that's a big thing that we kind of took from that.
Mhm.
It's just like airing out your bullshit and just being like very honest and like self-reflective and trying to give like the perspective of like why the way you are, for better or worse, especially worse, you know.
Yeah, it goes back to that kind of moniker you said in general of what you'd like to write about, which is lived experience, right? Like, and that can go into all different facets, and you can see that in like very, like you said, like not in a bad way, but in these animes instances of like self-indulgent, introspective, all these different things. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just very idiosyncratic, right? Like,
Correct.
and some that can make it to where it's your so yeah, that's great background. Let's go ahead and dive into this. The first track, "Counting Sheep." Is there anything to really speak to on this one for people that may have not checked out the band before?
Yeah. It's funny how this came up because I think when we were first writing this, we had the rest of the EP written out, including a track that didn't make the EP. That's actually a bonus track on our cassette. So if you want to buy a cassette,
Nice.
you want the bonus track, blah blah blah. Here's a shill. But Felipe, I think, was working at like his like music store job at the time and was just fucking around, and I think just like tabbed it out. And it was just like it just kind of came to be and included elements of the other songs, and it was like this is a perfect intro to the EP. But it's essentially about the window room in general is a lot about like dreams and the intersection between dreams and reality. Growing up, like not being able to deal with like a lot of like traumatic things around me, I like kind of got really into like kind of trying to hide into my dreams and like trying to like and like sleeping and like trying to like if anyone knows me, like it's almost a meme with all my friends. Like, yeah, that's like an Adrian nightmare because I have like full on like fucking like movies of dreams in my nightmares. And when I realized that as a young kid that I was like my brain was capable of that, I kind of used that as like an escape tool. But through, let's just say, through exterior means that are definitely not drugs, kind of learned that and therapy and you know other things just like that is super unhealthy. And so Counting Sheep is essentially about that. It is kind of like the thesis statement in a way of the EP, and it is also like kind of it leads into Funeral for Rats. And so like a Funeral for Rats is a sequel to our song Vultures, which we can I guess we can get into that. But yeah, and we just also wanted like a fucking fast song. We were like, we got to do more blast beats, and we were like, well, this song we're gonna do more blast beats. So that was
yeah, I love that because that song is crushing. Again, like it's one of those songs that like I mean this in a good way. When I first listened through the EP, we got to Funeral for Rats, and like I couldn't believe it was like under 2 minutes long because like so much seems to happen in the song. And yeah, adding in like it's just crushing, and it's so good. You mentioned this a little bit. I think you mentioned this a little bit already. Sorry, I was trying to double check here with like I couldn't find the lyrics anywhere to specifically break down, but lyrically, were there any like other specific inspirations for this one? I know you said it's the sequel to Vultures, but like what's kind of like the specific like lyrical background on I guess you could speak to both of them since it's a sequel, both Vultures and Funeral for Rats.
I got a lot of daddy issues. That's just what it is. I just got a lot of daddy issues. I had a very like I think Vultures is a lot about how not just like my dad who like he tried but he kind of did a bad job in a lot of ways, you know. And it's kind of a speaking to like generational trauma and into like having a lot of like the male figures in my life kind of like imparting me on like very negative traits and like a little bit of like a talk on toxic masculinity, I think is if I were to summarize it, that's kind of like where it comes from. So Counting Sheep is kind of like the result of all that. It's kind of like because of these experiences, I started doing this thing. And this thing is a way for me to not face my bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where it comes from. There is like an exterior, what's it called? Inspiration. Back on my nerd shit. There was a game called Amori that I played during the pandemic when we were writing this. And it's essentially about that, is that a kid goes through traumatic things and he starts hiding in his dreams. But when he's in his dreams, the nightmares start to like crawl up. And if you're learning that this is not a healthy thing to cope with your shit. So it was kind of like one of those things when I played it, it was like Christmas of like 2020 or 2021. And it was just one of those things where like I was like sitting on Discord with my friends and we were like I think the first demo, like we had just finished this, so I was like, what am I gonna write this about? Like what do I want to do? And I was playing through this game and I was like, holy shit, I've never been so seen by something. That sucks. So like it kind of came from that.
I think it's good for people to be introspective of toxic masculinity, it's not this new, this is a dumb thing to say, but it's not this new phenomenon that like we're just so inundated with it like on a day-to-day basis.
It's like now. Jesus, this thing just like is like it makes all men fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Like,
and but we've lived with it, and we've everyone, I mean, obviously not me primarily, has felt the brunt of it. It's been, women in marginalized communities and everything else in between. But like, it's, I think it's something that a lot of men or whoever else like need to combat in a constructive and introspective way of it being generational, right? Like, it's like this, like you said, like it's this idea of like, it didn't come out of fucking nowhere. Sexism doesn't just exist in a vacuum. And all these different things.
I mean, all these things are like tenets of like white supremacy and like the patriarchy and like, all right, I can see someone rolling their fucking eyes, but these things exist and they create like these things that quite honestly just hurt everybody. Like they just hurt everyone, including yourself. So it's like you should probably deal with it.
Yeah, you will live a more fruitful, constructive life if you deal with the shit and realize you deal with it on a daily, chronic basis, and not that it's something that you just like, you become like some progressive guy, and then therefore this issue isn't there. It's like that issue is very prominent in all walks of life, right?
Correct.
But yeah, a great thing to break down again, and above, a lyrical content and all that aside, like songs rip, both Vultures and Funeral for Rats and Counting Sheep. Going into the next one, The Window Room, a title track of the EP. Go ahead and break this one down for me, and kind of give the background on it.
Yeah. Okay. Window Room is inspired by an experience that definitely was not done with a psychedelic that I had taken and that my guitarist had taken, and we definitely did not mean to do a heroic dose. It was definitely supposed to be, or not supposed to be. I don't know what I'm doing for this bit. I'll just be candid about it. We took too much and we like broke through reality. I was like experiencing like samsara, like it was like the reincarnation of like the soul type shit. And I'm not trying to sound like a Grateful Dead dude. I'm not like, and I'm for all those listening, don't do your substances without doing your research and in safe ways. Okay, I'm saying that. But it was one of those things where once again in the like aspect of dreams and reality, I was kind of forced to face a lot of like mental truths about things, very much in line with the stuff that I'm talking about in Rats and Vultures and stuff like that. Just a lot of things. So the song kind of has its origins in that, but it's also just like I don't know, we were like a very like melodic band before, so this was our like kind of like dipping our toes into like how can we stay kind of melodic but like in this like new sound that we're trying to go for. And it has like the kind of big, there's the thesis statement is that in dreams we find our peace, in life we find our pain. Yeah, that's just all it really is. It's just kind of like a song describing that experience and like what we got out of it and like what we learned from it. And like once again, like taking every like internal like piece of like a puzzle almost of like all the things that like you wanted to try to figure out. For a moment there was like clarity. And the window room is actually inspired by like the name. It's inspired by like I lived in a studio for like a year, almost 2, and the window to it only went to a brick wall. So you can imagine that like that wasn't exactly the greatest for my mental health on some days, especially in the pandemic, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no kidding.
So when we were like kind of rounding out that song, it was kind of like I'm in the window room. We were also watching a lot of Twin Peaks at the time.
That'll do it. Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of like, I guess it's another like external non-music inspiration for like all of us, like ubiquitously, is a lot of Lynchian concepts, a lot of Twin Peaks, you know, like that kind of stuff is very much like we're big fans of that. And that's kind of like, I guess part of it is like, you know, Agent Coop going into the Black Lodge is like a kind of like this thing that we all kind of felt very drawn to in terms of like this concept of like crossing into a realm that like everything's not exactly like concrete, but like there are aspects of like your psyche being brought out and like aspects of like your personal traumas. A lot of trauma in this band. I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of the band is just being like when I had a hard life. I had a hard childhood, but I mean, like that once again, lived experience. So
that's lived experience and a relatable experience for a lot of people, like you said earlier. Regardless of like privilege you've had, people or wherever you grew up socioeconomically or whatever, there's certain things that can occur in people's lives that everyone can have some semblance or some experience of trauma and dealing with trauma and either having introspection or going off the deep end or a bit of both, right?
No, for sure, and I think that's a big thing that we try to like. Be like, I think a lot of like metalcore and hardcore has this aspect of like trying to like face yourself, and I think we're not any different on that end. Is like a lot of just like kind of like looking in the mirror and being like, yo, that wasn't cool, don't do that anymore, you know?
Yeah, that's a lot better. I like that. I like that element of metalcore that was both early on in it and a lot more so now, as opposed to like a lot of the bands that came out when I was, you know, in high school and early in college in the 2010s, where there's just like a lot of like weirdly misogynistic lyrics that were just
oh
like,
my god,
totally
it's so crazy how like
reason.
like I was super into that. Like I was a Seenie weenie. Like
Yeah,
I was like,
same.
yeah, get on your knees and like you're a whore and like. I was like, and now you look back on it, it was like, wow, that was really bad.
Yeah,
those riffs still kind of hit, but that was really bad.
Yeah, can somebody send me the instrumental version of those? Because
let's maybe change up the lyrics here on the Redux, you know.
Yeah, I remember like just like this. I'm on a tirade here, but like I just remember the shirts where
tirade.
everybody would have the script shirt with the most misogynistic lyric that they had that they would just throw on it, and they were the ones that were going gangbusters at Warped Tour. You know what I mean? It was like those shirts were selling out in 5 seconds. It's a whole thing, but you know I guess
that was a weird aspect. Yeah, I hear you. No.
But that's my long-winded way of saying I much prefer the introspective trauma dumping, I guess, is the way to go. But no,
side tangent. Real quick. And speaking of that era, we saw a band in Minnesota on a release run last week hit the Running Man. They hit the Running Man.
Oh my god, that is a throwback.
And it was like sick. Because they were like this, like, I'll shout them out. They're called Eyes of Sorrow. They're out from, I think, Minnesota, Minneapolis. And they like, they kind of have like a blackened hate breed thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to really describe it. But they hit the Running Man, and it was the hardest thing. I swear to God, just like every neuron in me fired at once. Like, it was crazy. The last time I saw that, it was lame. But then it was really cool.
Things cycle back, you know what I mean? Things come back into fashion, right?
That is what we're seeing a lot right now. Is that like I think the newer generation in the scene is kind of like revering that era. So it's like for us, it's cool because like, well, we stayed liking that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now that we're old, but like we're seeing that a lot. Like tight shirts, Jinko jeans. Like like I was like, this is crazy. But just a side tangent.
No. I mean, I'm all for the side tangents. That's what the long form podcasts are for. You know what I mean? But the Lynchian thing, like David Lynch, R.I.P. obviously recently.
Yeah, R.I.P.
What a with all these things you're referencing, allegedly psychedelics and Twin Peaks and all these, like, because you talk about like the most, I keep using this word in this recording, it's gonna bug me when I edit it that I said it too much, but like the idiosyncratic way that David Lynch approached writing and everything else in between, and direction and all these different things, like, you can't really, whether it was something you watched that you were like, I really enjoy this and this is speaking to me, or you walk away, I've known people that watch Twin Peaks or whatever, and they walk away and they're like, what the fuck did I just consume? It's singular. You know what I mean? And like, it's only going to be that way when you really dive into what your own brain sort of is, right? Like I can connect with you definitely on that whole like sort of ego death and facing these things that you never did before, because
ego death. That's a big one for Winter Room, actually. Yeah, that's actually one of the initial. Yeah. I couldn't find the word earlier, but yep.
Or like facing trauma because you've kind of taken these things that kind of break down a few walls, like in your brain type deal for a couple of hours. It's, I think in some ways it could be a very beneficial thing that some people or a lot of people should attempt. But now I sound like I'm going into like old school Joe Rogan territory, and I really don't want to do that.
That's why I was like, listen, I didn't know how to like allude to it. And I was trying to do the bit, and I was like, let's just be honest.
Just talk about it. Yeah.
Because that is where it came from. So I can't like, I'm not going to lie about that. You know what I mean? Like there's just, it is 100% like a big part of what made that song.
Yeah. And that's cool. And like, it's, it's something that more and more, I think it's more normalized now that like people understand that it's sort of like a different realm of its own thing that brings you to this point with all that kind of stuff. That goes to the song that ends the EP, and also the one that I've probably personally listened to the most from your band, which is Burial Rites, which, for anyone that's listened to this podcast that knows like my stances on, like I said earlier, about politics and activism and all those kinds of things, should be probably no surprise with like what the lyrical content is here, but I'm burying the lead a little bit. Speak to Burial Rites, speak to what this song is about and everything in between.
Sure. So to tie everything with it, we did a lot of the internal, and a lot of the like external was kind of like all right, we like a lot of, to go back to like Vultures and Funeral for Rats, a lot of it is examining my relationship with violence and how violence works on like a personal level. But then you look at how violence can be used in policy, how it can be used in marginalizing communities, how it is used against like, queer people of color, especially the Black community, especially in America. And I think that like you said earlier, talking about George Floyd, I think that was a big radicalization moment for a lot of people. I had always like kind of erred on that side, but like I think like because a lot of people, including myself, are just sitting at home and then like watching these things happen, and then like I got pretty involved with like protesting and mutual aid stuff, and just kind of like seeing like how fucked it can be just on like a, like, I'm watching like a woman beg a cop to stop, and they don't fucking care, I'm watching people get the shit kicked out of them like 10 feet in front of me because of what? Because of fucking what? Nothing. Like, because of what? Capital? Because you're gonna get a paycheck from this? Like, so when we were kind of like and this is a good time to bring this up, is that like, while I do write like all the lyrics, the band has a giant part in helping me be more concise and kind of being like, okay, what are you trying to say here? Let's like get to the point, right? So it was originally already going to be like, I heard the first riff and like, we gotta make this like the fuck cop song, you know what I mean? Like, not to belittle it, but it was just like, I heard the riff and I was like, I mean, come on, like, But like when I try to flesh it out and connect it to the rest of the EP and like really like clarify it, we were like, well, violence begets violence. When you start to oppress people and you start to like put their backs against a wall, it is only just that is reciprocated. And so that's what the song is about, is that, and not to make it like this, like, I don't know, like everything under the umbrella, but whenever we play this song, I always try to mention that, like, don't fuck with no genocide, don't fuck with no ICE, don't fuck with no cops. All these systems that are used to oppress people, that is really what the song is about. But we knew that, like, something that, like, we see right here, right now, what I have seen personally has been through the police. And so that's kind of where the song was born from, was like, it's an examination of violence and our relationship with it as a society. And then where's that manifested a lot, and mostly from the police. Yeah. So that's kind of where that's really where it comes from, is that.
Well, I mean, it's good that it's cool that you include this song, which is kind of a different take, like you said, on violence than the other three, which are much more like introspective and, like you said, like not in burial rites is lived experience, but I mean like lived experience like in like a lot more internal way in the first three tracks, where like I don't know, it's good to point out that like it's the old quote that like a lot of leftists or activists or whatever would say, is that like, well, the state has a monopoly on violence. Like people can talk about all these different things, people can fearmonger about crime, people can do all these different things, but like it's just because they don't realize what violence is, right? Like it's kind of like, and again, I'm not going to put you on the spot here and have you give your take on this, but it's kind of like the whole United Health CEO in December.
No, that one, I don't care. Two, like I already got made fun of for looking like Shaggy in the video. Like, like I already went about and said it, and I'll just say this, that there are future songs that will cover other things. So like I'm toast. You know what I mean? Like don't worry about it.
But you know what I mean?
To what you're saying though, yeah, I'm sorry. We're bouncing off each other.
Yeah.
We're riffing. A thing that we were trying to tie into it is the idea that all these things happen generationally to people, and they kind of like the output of that can look like a lot of different things. It can look like fighting against it. It can also be being very complicit to it. A lot of people who are abusers end up being police. I mean, was that 40% or whatever? Like that's
it's 40% have admitted. You know what I mean?
Like I mean, there's some correlation there.
Yep.
So yeah, to what you're saying, like it is definitely like it is very different in terms of like subject matter to the rest, but they were coming from the same place and the same like introspection, just that it went to something that I guess is topical,
Yeah, of course, topical, and also like chronically
and a problem
topical.
And, yeah, like just like a big problem.
Yeah,
like just a huge problem.
Yeah, these police, I don't know, they might be doing some bad shit. No, but yeah, no, I mean, I can't stress enough that not just burial rites, but the window room, funeral for rats, counting sheep, vultures, all of these other songs that you've put out, as well as the window room EP, have a lot of layers to them, both like delivery wise with the music, also lyrically, as you've just spelled out here. Thanks for breaking down all those in depth too, by the way. I always really appreciate when people can kind of talk to it the way that you did.
This is super fun. This is super cool.
This is something I've been doing over the past year more with the show, is like breaking down people's songs, because I listen to a lot of other music podcasts. Maybe I'll keep this in, maybe I won't, but like, and it seems like they act like nobody cares about like the deep diving into the music of the bands. They'll kind of make jokes about it, and it's like, I don't know, when I'm doing a music podcast, I want to deep dive into the music. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. And there's space for both. I think that there's definitely, I mean, it's just like there's your interest, and then there's other interests regarding, like, plenty of music podcasts are like telling tour war stories. I love that shit. You know what I mean? I fucking love that. Yeah. But I think that just like music, there's plenty to talk about, and there's plenty to kind of like do it. And you seem to genuinely have an interest, so like, why not put it in the content you're making?
Yeah. Why, yeah. If I faked it, it would be very obvious, I suppose, right? But I guess before we wrap things up here and just tell people what's going on with the band, what you're doing going forward, and do plugs and all that, usual stuff. Is there any other? We talked about Vultures being kind of the prelude to Counting Sheep, or Funeral for Rats. Sorry.
But I mean, Counting Sheep and Funeral for Rats were meant to be almost one song.
Yeah. So it kind of flows that way. Yeah, definitely. Is there any other song that you again, doesn't have to be political or social commentary or anything like that? Was there any other songs from your releases from Waterloo all the way up to this release that you can kind of think of that you would want to break down or kind of give the backstory to, or anything of that nature?
I could give just the rest of the singles in that Vultures thing. So the Garden of Elms comes from giving a lot of like love in relationships to people that didn't necessarily deserve it. It's a lot of like why waste my time, type shit with like significant others or even like friends or whatever. And then next song on that was Undertow. Undertow is just like self-deprecation, it's self-loathing, it's kind of like dealing with defeat and the idea of like I might do it, I might do it, I might do it.
Right.
Don't test me, I might do it. So I think like those songs lead into Window Room in a really good way. I always like when bands kind of have like a chronological kind of feel to their music.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like you're almost like reading a book in a way where you're getting to see where these like songs evolve into other songs and these ideas evolve into other ideas. So I mean, I don't know, check them out. Or don't, that's fine.
No, you definitely should. And yeah, I like that idea too. I do appreciate when bands, like, you don't have to make some like vast. I think it's cool bands do this, like it's like vast, what's the word I'm looking for? Concept, right? Like I've spoken to the band Fox Cult before that's been on the show, where they literally like their whole thing is like this like sort of like Halo-y space odyssey craziness, and everything's in it. Even their like social media posts are related to it, all that kind of stuff. Like, that's really cool, but you don't have to do that to sort of show like this chronological growth and songs connected to each other. And you can do that in a real way that's like introspective of your own life and not like sort of storytelling, but still like has that kind of path like you're talking about. Like, I think you brought up Prada earlier.
Sure.
Prada's like a perfect example of that kind of thing, I think, as well. So yeah, that's really cool.
And to speak on that, we do have that in our band, just not always the music. We have like a lot of visuals that tie everything together and kind of have like a lore to it, but they're not necessarily 100% tied to the music all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Could you? I mean, you don't have to go, and I'm sure it takes a lot to explain that, but can you give me sort of like a little bit of an example of what you're talking about there?
Yeah, so to flex a little bit, once again, everything is a team with the band. We all do everything together. We all try. But I do kind of handle a lot of like the visual aspects of stuff. So if you watch any of like the music videos for Counting Sheep or Funeral for Rats, or pretty much all the so actually Vultures, Garden, Undertow, and then Counting Sheep and A Funeral for Rats, and the Window Room is going to get a music video probably in the next couple months. Those are all within like the same universe, I guess.
Okay.
So we wanted to build out kind of like the Lynchian idea of like kind of this like weird dream world kind of thing that like you see like these shadow people, and like they're like they kind of represent like I don't know, like internal strife or whatever, as like these like weird silly goofy guys, but they're also like kind of creepy. So I guess it's hard to say or talk about it without like looking at it, but like
yeah,
just know that like I love stuff like that. When you're talking about like that, like a band having like the Halo-y stuff, it's like we wanted to leave a little bit that in there, but the songs can exist on their own with just the songs being the songs. But there is a little bit of stuff that we have that we kind of allude to being part of. Like we joke that it's the Luca cinematic universe. And it is sort of that. Whether we'll like keep doing that, I'd like to. I don't know, but like at least those songs share like a overall like, I guess, yeah, they're in like their own little pocket of like reality.
Yeah, and what's cool about doing it that way is you can kind of ebb and flow into that when you want to. You're not like, you don't have to do that with every release, every song you're putting out, and everything in between. But like, if you want to reconnect it to a song from the Window Room or the other ones you alluded to, like, you can do that again. So that's really cool. I'll have to go back and look at all that stuff with that in mind, and I'm sure I'll catch TikTok, that.
Check out our fucking Instagram. Like, no, yeah. We call it, we joke, we call it schizo posting.
Yeah.
So you'll see a little bit of that in the coming months a bit, but they all kind of have like a shared like thing going on.
Very cool. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, and Adrian, thanks so much for coming on and breaking these songs down. Again, the Window Room,
for having me.
Came out just right. That was last week. Yeah, this past Friday. The 4 tracks again: Counting Sheep, Funeral for Rats, The Window Room. Burial Rites, fantastic band out of Chicago. Thanks so much for doing this. Again, give the people the plugs, where to find the band, if you've got anything else coming up soon that you want to tell people about. And then the last thing I do, other than the usual plugs, is I always play a song from the band at the very end in case somebody's never heard the band before. They like the conversation. They want to check it out without clicking anything else. So give those plugs and then pick a song from the Window Room, I would say, but pick a song from the Window Room to play at the end of this.
Okay. Yeah. You can find us all. We are Luca IL, because Illinois. So we are Luca IL. That's the best way to find us. We're on everything. Instagram, TikTok. I gotta brush off our Twitter, but you could go there, I guess, too. We're there. So check us out that way. You could probably play the Window Room.
Yeah.
Itself. That's the title track.
Yeah, let's do the title track from the Window Room. So the Window Room from Luca out of Illinois. Thanks again, Adrian, so much for doing this. And of course, all those plugs will be below in links as well. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you. This is super fun.
Absolutely.
Our peace.